In August of 1947, the vast British Indian Empire did not peacefully transition into independence. It violently fractured. The newly formed nation was immediately confronted with millions of displaced people moving across newly drawn borders. The state inherited 18th century levels of poverty, grew up in extreme aristocratic privilege. He was educated at elite British institutions, Harrow School and Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied natural sciences and law. He spent his early years in elite intellectual circles, but in the 1920s, he left those bubbles. He traveled into the countryside, encountering the severe realities of India's impoverished rural masses alongside Mahatma Gandhi. He later described himself as a queer mixture of East and West. This positioning gave him the unique ability to negotiate with British officials while still understanding the immediate physical demands of agrarian communities. As India's first prime minister, he used that exact background to combine the raw momentum of the nationalist movement with modern bureaucratic governance, beginning a 17-year project to construct an industrialized republic. The first major construction project was establishing parliamentary democracy in a region historically ruled by foreign empires and feudal landowners. He installed structural safeguards to protect this fragile system. He insisted on universal adult franchise, allowing every citizen to vote regardless of income or literacy. He treated political opposition with formal respect, and he strictly subordinated the military to civilian authority. He pushed the controversial Hindu code bills through Parliament to establish legal rights for women in marriage and inheritance. He also enforced a strict secularism to prevent the state from legally endorsing any single religion. He recognized that the Indian subcontinent contained vast linguistic and cultural diversity. Without a secular, democratic framework to mediate those differences, the new nation would tear itself apart. This diagram illustrates India's economic strategy. Nehru rejected pure American capitalism and rigid Soviet communism, opting instead for a middle path known as a mixed economy. He launched 5-year plans focused on state investments in dams and manufacturing, calling these steel plants the temples of modern India. Building them required collaboration with the Soviet Union and West Germany to produce domestic steel and achieve total self-reliance. To staff these industries, he poured resources into higher education. He established the Indian Institutes of Technology, the first of which was built on the site of a former British detention camp, along with dedicated space and nuclear research programs. Political freedom meant very little if the population remained impoverished. To him, heavy industry and scientific education were the only tools powerful enough to drag the economy into the 20th century. To prevent the country from being consumed by Cold War proxy battles, he crafted a foreign policy shield. Alongside leaders from Yugoslavia and Egypt, he founded the Non-Aligned Movement to give newly independent nations a neutral diplomatic path. He attempted to secure India's Himalayan borders entirely through diplomacy. In 1954, he signed the Panchsheel Agreement with Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai, establishing 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. But tensions over Tibet and the border persisted. When Nehru's government adopted an aggressive forward policy to establish military outposts in disputed areas, it provoked a massive military conflict, the 1962 Sino-Indian War. The Indian military was severely underprepared and suffered a humiliating defeat. The war exposed the limits of diplomatic idealism and marked the beginning of a sharp decline in Nehru's health. On May 27, 1964, Jawaharlal Nehru suffered a fatal heart attack. An estimated 1.5 million citizens lined Delhi's streets for his state funeral. After 17 years of singular leadership, the blueprint he left behind was immediately subjected to intense historical auditing. This flowchart illustrates a major critique of his economic model. State control bloated into the license permit Raj, a system where private enterprise was constantly bottlenecked by red tape, stalling economic growth for decades. Additionally, taking the domestic Kashmir conflict to the United Nations in 1948 internationalized a dispute that remains unresolved today. Yet, the ultimate test of his administration was survival. While dozens of other post-colonial governments fell to military coups or fractured along ethnic lines, the Indian Republic held together. The research laboratories and technical institutes he mandated in the 1950s trained the human capital that directly fueled the country's modern emergence as a global technology hub. His record contains distinct strategic failures, but his commitment to civilian rule, secularism, and scientific inquiry provided the structural scaffolding. He built the framework that allowed a deeply divided, formerly colonized population to govern themselves.